All right, there are massive protests that have broken out in Liverpool and Birmingham. So England is which is becoming the epicenter of very aggressive and assertive pro-Palestine rallies, but specifically anti-Israel. Here's what's happening. It's not just about the protest rallies. Look closely on your screen. They are spray painting areas with the Palestine flag colors. But look at this man. One man took it so far. And could this be a criminal case too? He actually took bags of mice. Imagine dozens of mouse, and then he released them into a McDonald's at the Star City location. And this was a protest with regard to Palestine and for Palestine and anti-Israel. And this is what he chose. While you can see crowds of people, and this was in Liverpool and Birmingham, they've taken over some of the local stations, and hundreds and thousands of them are protesting. Gaurav Sawant joins me on the phone line for this. Gaurav, we know that the United Kingdom, France, Germany have ensured that they support Israel completely. But what's unfolding in Europe, and specifically in London, in England, are these protests that are clearly turning assertive and aggressive, and that's for free Palestine. What are you picking up on the sort of protests emerging, even releasing mice into a McDonald's?
So, when we speak of that immediate incident of mice being released in McDonald's and hundreds of them, this is because McDonald's was feeding victims of terror, victims of Hamas terror in Israel, and also giving free food to soldiers who are going to the front lines in Israel to battle Hamas terror. So that is why McDonald's is being targeted, and not just McDonald's. Multiple multinational chains are being targeted while they claim to be pro-Palestinian, but they actually end up being pro-Hamas. The manner in which they then start targeting Israelis in these foreign countries, and this is a cause for grave alarm and great concern. You rightly pointed out, whether it's in the United Kingdom or in France or in pockets of Germany, and action is now being taken against some of these elements. There are some of these protests that are also taking place in the United States of America. So overall, the situation does appear to be very, very alarming. The world is divided, and it unfortunately is becoming more divided on religious lines instead of being divided and united in the war against radical terror. It seems to be divided on religious lines, and this is leading to a lot of panic in several parts of the world. There are apprehensions of terror strikes that will take place. And in England, of course, the police have said that they will crack down on anybody who violates the law of the land, Pooja.
All right, so Gaurav Sawant is telling us about these protests that have broken out. And Gaurav, another question to it. Can we now talk about in general about the countries in Europe, where while the countries and the governments have decided to stand largely by Israel, we see these sort of protests that are erupting. There are a lot of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish remarks and sloganeering that's also being seen. We see how the universities are reacting, the student council. A lot of Jewish students and members of the population have come forward to say they feel unsafe. It reminds them of the Holocaust and the sort of anger that's generating. So can we say that it's absolutely polarized and divided at this point in Europe?
In Europe, in the United States of America, in several parts of the world, things are taking a turn for the worse. In Europe, there is also a problem. A large number of refugees coming in from North Africa, from different parts of the world. There was one intelligence input which was extremely alarming, that they said most of the refugees who are coming in, are able-bodied men, several with military service in the background, not women, not children. And if they get weapons once they arrive in Europe, the situation could get extremely alarming. The kind of protests that are taking place, the protests that we saw in London, the protests in Paris. You and I were talking about one woman was shot at after she shouted Allahu Akbar and said it'll be end of you all, and behaved in a very aggressive manner. She was shot at in the abdomen when her hand reached for the abdomen, and the police were apprehensive that she may have a weapon. There are protests that are taking place in Brussels. There are protests that are taking place in Scandinavian countries. So overall, the situation does appear very alarming, and if unchecked, because now there are some governments that are considering that those who carry out these protests and violent protests may have to be deported, identified and deported. Then perhaps we will see some crackdown. If not, for Europe, the problem is only set to multiply.
Because is this really free Palestine protest? And free Palestine protest, of course, are permitted, are being taken out in England. But to release these bags of mice into a McDonald's, to take over the areas completely, shut down the local rail stations there in England, that's a lot of people are raising alarms if this is going beyond just a Palestine protest. And with the members of Jewish community who feel they are also now being targeted. Gaurav, I request you to stay on with me, because as we bring to the viewer about the Israel-Hamas war, which has entered into day 26,